Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Kevin Burke, thank you so much for being my guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I cannot thank you enough for your time. I'm so incredibly humbled to have you here, and I appreciate you being here, man. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, what we're going to do is we're going to start with where you were born, and then we're going to go through your life story all the way up to today. And then we can talk about anything that you'd like to talk about. I know you're the head of legal affairs for the California Association of Realtors, and I'm just absolutely honored that you made the time to be here with us.
I'm humbled by your comment. That's amazing. I've never had anybody say all that, but thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here. I really am. This is a great experience for me, and hopefully I can help with what I have to say. But yeah, I am the chair of legal affairs for the state of California, the California Association of Realtors next year. And last year I was chair of their risk management and consumer protection forum. And so I've just been honored by them. I don't know why they picked me. I always kind of figured that they must have picked somebody else and then they couldn't show up. So then they called me and said, can you sit in for them? And
so you're the default?
Yeah, but it lasts all the other meetings, right? And so apparently I present well. So no, so you said, but you said I can only have an hour. So I'm going to have to try to whittle it down here for you. So born in Brunswick, Georgia, St. Simon's Island, Navy family. And dad was a Navy guy. He was in military intelligence, so I really don't remember a lot of him in my early days. I left home when I was 14, so I was very young. A lot of people are surprised to hear that.
Did you grow up in that area?
No. That was where it was Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay. So when did you move to Scottsdale?
We're Navy, so
all over. Okay.
Yeah, all over the place. Okay. So Scottsdale, Arizona. Left home. I was in a high school that was a Jesuit college preparatory school. Okay. And interestingly enough, I just lived far enough away that I couldn't keep riding my bike the 15 miles each way. And so I ended up moving in with a small family. I had a nice little, room I could come and go. And then I realized I had to pay my way for stuff. So I started a parking company when I was 15. And so I didn't realize that I shouldn't have been driving all those years, right? Because I kind of figured everybody did that. Yeah. And so I started a parking company, and I started out with one restaurant, and ultimately, and I was using that to fund my way through school, because I really knew, even at that age, I knew the importance of a good education, and the education there was just off the charts. I mean, it was really incredible. I ended up running that parking company for about 10 years, made my first $1 million before I graduated high school, had 14 restaurants, 130 employees. And I don't know, I thought everybody did that. Right. And
so your service valeted cars?
Yeah. Parking cars. Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was 14 restaurants. I ended up with 14. I didn't start with 14. I started with one, and then ended up with a whole bunch of them, and it just worked out really well. And so, but I knew, after graduating from high school that, I didn't want to do that the rest of my life, because I kind of figured that, it'd be kind of like being an elevator man, I guess, and, in New York, where it would be one of those things that you just can't retire from. And so I did other stuff. I was involved in a lot of things. I had my share of stuff that is not on record, but I got my real estate license a couple of years later. I didn't do college right away. And my father always told me, he said, you got to go back and get a degree. And I said, Dad, I'm making more money than you are. I mean, it's like, as a kid, I'm making more money. So I ended up getting a real estate license, a little rocky start to begin with. I actually went to work with the sister of a gal that I was dating at the time, and she was going to show me the ropes and tell me everything that happened in real, what to do in real estate and all that kind of stuff. So literally, this was before cell phones, before fax machines. This is 1979, right? So very, very early. And so what I did was I learned how to answer telephones, and because that's what she did. She planted me in the office, let me answer phones, and so I really never learned anything. And so I figured, that's not going to work out really well. And of course, by that point, the girlfriend threw me out of the house, and so I was homeless there for a little while. But I ended up gravitating. I did ultimately go back to get my degree. I got a degree at Arizona State. And
so you're a Sun Devil.
Yeah, Sun Devil. Well, and then later I ended up in Tucson, and I ended up in graduate school at Tucson for the JD PhD program, which was a Juris Doctor and a PhD in psychology. And so, but at the same time, I started doing real estate, and it wasn't long before I opened up my own office, right? Because I'm just one of those overachiever kind of guys, task-oriented overachiever. Opened up my own office, had about 40 people, and we were killing it. I mean, we were just doing really, really well. And so
this is in Arizona, right?
I'm still in Arizona. And then, I just, and so every weekend I'm driving back and forth to San Diego, right? Because I just had this thing for San Diego. I had like 68,000 miles on my car in 1 year. And I was just going back and forth, right? And so finally I said, this is crazy. And so I walk into a real estate office in Claremont Mesa, of all places. And there's this guy, I remember who he was actually, and this was in the mid 80s. And I said to him, and he was from Tucson, Arizona. And so, so talk about a small world, right? And so I said, so how, what's the difference between real estate in Tucson and real estate here in San Diego? And he looks at me and he goes, there's more zeros in my paycheck. And I went, got it. I've never forgotten that. And I go, okay, more zeros. Because, I'm doing 100, 125 transactions a year, right? From, out of the chute.
Right.
And people would ask me, and I was going to every educational opportunity I could possibly go to. And then people would ask me, they would say, how are you doing all these deals? And I go, I thought everybody did all these deals. Remember, I always thought everybody could drive a car at 14 or at 11, actually. And so I just kept doing it. Nobody told me I wasn't supposed to be able to do this stuff, right? So I just did it. And again, it was great. And so then I moved over to San Diego. I got rid of the Tucson connection, and I let them run it. I mean, I had all my people there. I let them go ahead and run it. So, and there I ended up in San Diego. And so I just do the same thing. I became president of the North County Association shortly after I got here. Then let's see, 2019, I was president of the San Diego Association. I'm one of the few guys that were actually president of more than one local association. And it's like, I always tell everybody, I just missed the meeting where they were asking for volunteers. And so, they just put me in place. And so I ended up doing it. And it was a pretty good ride. But education has always been my thing. And the reason I moved from one association to the other was because I just wanted to teach. I knew that. I was teaching in 3 colleges pretty much simultaneously. I was teaching at San Diego Community and Miracosta and UCSD in their real estate programs. And so, just because I had learned a lot of stuff. And so I think right around that time, let's see, this was late 90s, because I had just got my law degree, right? I graduated, I got the American Jurisprudence Award in real estate transactions. So, if you're an attorney, that's like a really big deal, right? So, but most people don't even know what that is, they know what law school is, right? But yes, and I did graduate, and I was proud to do it. But I just knew that my bug was teaching. And so I had been in real estate for a long time. My goal had been to graduate and become an environmental attorney. So I got a graduate degree in hazardous materials management while I was waiting to get into law school. And then I just knew my last semester I wasn't going to practice. So, my credentials that I had at that point, I thought, wow, why don't I just stay in real estate? And if I tell you, Mike, my business quadrupled. I mean, it went off the charts from right after I graduated. All my clients ended up becoming doctors, lawyers, engineers, all the people that nobody else wants to work with. They were just kind of like attracted to me for some weird reason. And so I just continued to do a ton of transactions. And but my goal was always, helping people, not with any care at all for like price range. I never cared how much it was. I did in 1 year, I did a $4.2 million transaction on a house, but I also did a $95,000 double wide.
Yeah.
So, it's like, I don't care. And I
Yeah.
always figured that my job was to help the homeless. I wanted to help the people that were either homeless already to find housing, or help them become homeless by selling their house. And so, so with the college classes I was teaching, at the same time doing all that, still doing a lot of transactions. This is before teams and stuff, right? So, I was doing really, really well. And so, and again, I'm just helping people. I never looked at the money. I always looked at how many units I was doing, how many
Yeah.
transactions, how many people was I helping, without any care at all about the money. Because I kind of discovered early in my career that the money comes anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care. It's going to come. I mean, I live with that today, even still, it's going to be there. I have clients I can't get rid of, frankly. They hang in there. So it's kind of cool. So for about 15 years, I was teaching in the colleges. I was teaching the real estate program, the various things, mostly the legal stuff, right? Because again, I had my law degree, so everybody felt like I knew something, and I use all the big words and stuff. So, and then finally, I stopped teaching in the colleges. I only teach now at UCSD. I teach continuing education for attorneys. So I teach real property law and it's MCLE credit stuff, and I love it. But I'd really rather be standing in front of a room full of people and talking.
Yeah.
But I've ended up, I've been relegated now to webinars, that kind of thing. And so, but I can be anywhere in the world, and I have been, and I am right now. I'm not in San Diego at the moment, and I could tell you, I'm in Virginia. I have a broker's license in Virginia. I've got a broker's license in California, and I teach in both states. I'm accredited instructor in Virginia as well. And so that was just always my passion. So I never stopped. I've been teaching the continuing education for attorneys for about 25 years now.
Wow.
And so people are like, I look back and I go, where did that go? Right.
Yeah.
25 years of that happiness. And so, I always loved it because I get into a class. My wife was in my real estate classes. And of course she saw, how I behaved and all that kind of, this is before we ever got together, and then she came up and wanted to sit in on one of my law classes up at the university. And when I got done, she comes up to me, she looks at me, she says, I don't know who you are. I mean, you're a completely different guy. She says, you're in the real estate class and you've got a lot of energy and you're moving around, you're telling jokes and everybody's laughing, we're having a great time and learning a lot of things, right? I make it interesting. But then you go to law class and she says, you're abusive to those people. I said, they're lawyers, right? So I'm getting even, so I joke about that, but
taking out your frustrations on them, are you?
taking out my frustration. So, the morph of all of that is that today, I'm obviously bi-coastal. I go back and forth very frequently, and I continue to teach, and that's my passion. And so I've learned recently how to do a lot of things like QR codes and Bitly links and stuff like that. And even today, I was buying software because I fancied myself doing podcasts and stuff. But I've done a lot of talks for the California Department of Real Estate, and I love the Department of Real Estate. They've been so good to me, right? So they approved my purchase agreement class, my RPA class. They approved my buyer representation class. And of course, and my life is all about timing. All of a sudden the Burnett decision comes down in the Midwest there. And it's like, everybody wants to talk to me about the buyer representation agreement, something I've been trying to sell people for 25 years. Right. And when I say sell, I mean, just get them to use it. Right. Yeah. And so I always say, when you define your duty, you limit your liability. And so, that form defines what your duty is. And so you're going to tell them what you do. But if you don't tell them and you don't have a written agreement with them, you really don't even have a client. You've just got a customer. So, and they don't become a client until they have a written agreement. So I just always felt like we were deceiving people by telling them that they were our client when in fact they weren't. I mean, we have an agency relationship with them, but we're not, and then of course now today, I do a lot of trial work as an expert witness. And so
Right.
I get hired by attorneys to come in and do, mostly defense work. But that's my thing. And so I read through files and things, and I do DRE audits and stuff. I look through, they're gonna see the fact you don't have a beginning and an ending date on the listing agreement, and that you could
Right.
possibly lose your license for that, right? I mean,
Right.
so there's a lot of really great things, and I was really proud because when they called me up and they said, will you do a podcast with us on legal matters and documentation in a real estate transaction? And I thought, wow, me? I mean, what about the other guy? That kind of thing. And they said, no, you're the forms expert. You know this stuff better than anybody does. And I
Yeah.
was just so proud of that. And
Yeah.
and I went to the up to the commissioner. It rings anyway. Well, so my wife can get through, and nobody else can. But everybody else is do not disturb, but she gets through. So
That's right.
I'm going to pay for putting her into voicemail.
Right.
But anyway, I went up to the commissioner at a meeting we had in Sacramento, and I said, we're in the same business. I'm chair of Realtor Risk Management and Consumer Protection, and I said, you're the Department of Real Estate, you're the commissioner, you're all about consumer protection. That's what they're there to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always said that I always want to be on the right side of the guns and badges, right? So I always want to be on the right side. When the bullets are going, I want them coming behind me, right? I don't want to be having to face it. So I've, and he said, yeah, I get what you're saying. Consumer protection. We're both in that same game. And I said, we need to remember that when we do real estate transactions. We really need to remember, they made an interesting comment to me. And again, I know I'm rambling, but they made an interesting comment. They said the number one complainant that they have, the majority of the population that files a complaint at the Department of Real Estate are first-time home buyers. And I said, that just so saddens me. It really does. That means that we're either not explaining things to the first-time home buyer, or we don't know, and we don't know the answer to the question. And I keep trying to tell people it's okay to say I don't know. Right. I mean, people are waiting for me to say it. They get their phone up and record it and all that kind of stuff, because sometimes we just don't know. But you need to address it. You need to acknowledge the question, and then you need to tell them, what, let me find out and I'll get back to you.
Well, you need to be willing to admit that you don't know the answer. Okay. Yeah. And I owned a Keller Williams office for 18 years. I think I told you this. I was a broker owner of the office.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I experienced was they just were so unbelievably embarrassed to say that they didn't know the answer. And so one of the things we did in all of our trainings, Kevin, was we encouraged them to actually say, you know what, that's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I will get you the answer. Okay.
You hit it.
Because they've got to be comfortable saying it in training so that they can say it at an open house, or they can say it when they're showing property, or they can say it when they're in front of a client. For some reason, they're in front of a client and they become a different person. I just interviewed a gentleman last night who wrote his first book, and it's a book called Relentless Sales. And one of the things that he talks about, he's actually in the medical device field. And he goes out, he's been a manager for a number of years. He goes out with his reps, and his reps go into, one of his reps is just this kid that's got this world-class personality that everybody dearly loves. The kid walks into a doctor's office in front of the client and becomes a different person entirely. And so they come out of the appointment, and he said, look, you've got to be yourself. And I found myself, Kevin, coaching him on what I would do is ask him this question: what's holding you back from being yourself in that appointment? What is it about being in front of a client that gives you that trepidation to where you don't feel like you can be you? Yeah. Right? Because there's something holding them up, right? And I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir because you have a doctorate in psychology and all that. But the thing is, it's a real thing. It's a real issue. And the consumers, Kevin, you hit it right on the head. The consumers are the ones that are paying the price.
Yeah. And if you look at that lawsuit, and I don't want to get too far into it because I don't give legal advice, but frankly, it had to do with the lack of disclosure or lack of clarity on where does the money go. Right. I mean, if you look at it, and my personal opinion, the appeals got filed immediately. I mean, it's going to be years before we know what that's going to look like. Right. I've had people tell me the real estate industry is over. I mean, it's like, really? I mean, there are other countries are looking at us as the model. And California being a country, I mean, people are looking at California as a model, right? And so, but it's interesting because it's they're the antithesis of Virginia. So in California, it's a caveat vendor, which means let the seller beware.
Right.
In Virginia, it's caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. No disclosures of any kind. But when you're in California, you got to tell them everything, right? Yeah. And so it's just fascinating to me that I did a transaction, and again, I'm brokered in both, but I did a transaction in California. The gal was a licensee in Virginia, and she just got her California license. Her very first transaction with me, she says, "Oh my God, I've never seen so much paperwork." But again, I'm the Forbes guy, right? So she had everything. She knew everything was going on, but before the end of the first day. I mean, it was just great. So I'm thankful that I'm in California. I mean, I really am. And so I think that raises your learning curve much faster than you would maybe in other states where they're much more casual about things. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I have to tell you that in the 18 years that I owned that Keller Williams office, I spent way too much time in court. And I mean, way too much time in court. And I sat in a small claims court in Vista, North County, right? I sat in small claims one day and we won our case hands down. It wasn't even close. Okay. And apparently we finished too early because the judge decided that he was going to spend the next 20 some minutes excoriating me on how our laws are so unbelievably favored towards the buyer and not towards the seller. In other words, the pendulum's gone too far to the buyer side, right? In terms of protection. Well, that comes as a reaction to what we used to have, which were laws that favored the seller much more, right? The legislature has been trying to correct it, and they've been correcting it. They might have overcorrected. He spent 20 minutes absolutely excoriating me about real estate law. And I finally just said to him, I said, "Your Honor, I'm really sorry that you feel this way. If I was the governor or if I was, the Speaker of the House or something, I might be able to help you. But I'm just a broker, sir. And I'm just doing what Carr is telling me to do, right? I'm using the forms, I'm following the laws that were passed." So, it's a frustrating thing for people. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.